Well, hello, and welcome to the third episode of the Yellow Coat Club podcast. My name is Sean Little, and I will be your host once again today. And for the first time, I'm using a video version that I'm going to try on YouTube or something else. And so it's really weird to be like speaking, and instead of looking at an audience, I'm literally looking at myself. So it is what it is. So we'll try it and we'll see how it goes. But I'm really excited for today's episode. So today's episode is based after one of the chapters that you will find in the book, The Yellow Coat Club, that is coming November 6th. Shameless plug. It is, 3 weeks away from the day today that I'm recording it. By the time you'll hear this, it will be 2 weeks away. So mark your calendars, November 6th. The Yellow Coat Club, a book that was put on my heart to write 5 years ago, and then the culmination of everything that's happened in my life. I really felt, this March, I just heard that small whisper being like, "You're ready. You're ready to do this." And so if you want to know more about the origin story or anything, go check out the first episode. It's on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, and you can learn about the origin story. Or you can mark your calendar and shameless plug, once again, go and buy the book. It will be out November 6th. So I'm really excited. I've been doing like my last minute edits on it, and I find like a mistake every once in a while. I chose to self-publish the book and created everything, and so I'm like, man, there might be an error in it, and it's gonna like irk me so bad because I want to be so bad a perfectionist, and yet it happens. We make mistakes, and I feel like for so long, like I kind of almost feel like there's going to be this part where I'm going to end up making a mistake, and it's going to be this divine intervention to be like, and it's okay. Because for the longest time, making a mistake almost felt like it wasn't an option, or because of the mistakes I was making, the hiding was, well, I'm going to go numb any way that I can possibly think of in order to not have to face the reality of my human limitations. So I hope that makes sense. Today we're going to be talking about the label that I wore as the good child. So the good child is a label that was actually given to me by my mom. And when it was given to me, when it was first spoken over me, I really felt like, man, this could have been that amazing moment where you're like, oh man, I'm a good child. But instead it was not said in that way. And in fact, it was said to me in a way where I had ultimately disappointed my mother, and the words really hurt. They stung, they stayed with me, and they are ones that I carried with me for a really, really, really long time. And I'd be lying to you if I said that I still don't carry that today, and yet it is something that I have to fight often. And so, anyways, to kind of give a backstory for it, I'm one of 3 kids. I'm the middle child. Say what you want of the middle child. I've heard good things, I've heard bad things, indifferent, whatever. I am what I am. But there were 3 of us. And so I have an older brother who is a little bit more defiant, with our mom. And then, I have my younger sister who, I just always remember, it wasn't like she was doing anything wrong or anything, but it seemed like my mom was dissatisfied with so many things in her life. And so, ultimately, I apparently ended up being the good child, the one that did know how to please her, even though I would let her down. And so anyways, if you listen to the last podcast, episode 2, like you'll kind of understand, like my father passed away when I was 9. And so, my mom was left to raise us kids. And so, she, in my mind, was like, she was trying to keep everything together. There's, these 3 kids that she now has, and she's still trying to, manage taking care of us, manage, being happy. And, she was someone, and I'll talk in a later episode of, where she was at in her life, or at least my speculations. But regardless, she ended up getting remarried. And even after my dad died, I just remember like this sense of security just dissipating from my life. And so it could have been environment, it could have been people, but I started to slip into depression and anxiety, and yet had no name for it. I couldn't articulate what was going on, but I was experiencing it. I don't know if that resonates with you, but it's like, I don't really know how to name that thing. I mean, even as early as this morning, I was walking and I was processing some stuff, and I was like, wow, fear has really gripped your life right now. And I was like, wow, how powerful it is to be able to name that. So anyways, my mom gets remarried, and my stepdad was just very different than my dad. In any of the, podcasts or stories, and even in the book, I even say, the things in my life are I remember them. It's not to drag anybody under the mud. It's my experience, and they had their own experience. They can't take that away from me. But my stepdad is not somebody I felt secure around. There were times, but at this point in my life, like, the security just seemed out the window. And so, anyways, over time, this feeling of insecurity, just kept being pervasive. We were moving again. Moving felt like, one of these constant things that we were doing. And so, I'm at a new school, new house, new family, like, and it was a lot. And despite any of the tension that my brother and I had for the longest time in our lives, he was always someone who would protect me. So anyways, getting to this story, one day we come home from school and it's report card season, and something I was really did well in school, and so I showed the report card to my mom, and the that was payment for, hey, we're going to go to the skate park later, and I was like, we're going, and my brother was like, hey, I don't have my report card, and she's like, well, you're not going. He's like, what? He's like, I don't have my report card, and she's like, yeah, and you're not going, and it just exploded. And they're getting mad at each other, screaming match. My brother at some point calls her butt. And I remember being in this house. I remember sitting at the table. The TV was over here. I remember, the colors of the bowl, this blue and yellow pastel. I was eating Lucky Charms. Like, I remember everything clear as day. And then, as she had done before in our lives, she turned to him and she screamed at him, and she basically just said, get out of my house. And she was serious. And I started crying. And I remember my mom finally looking at me, and she's like, why are you crying? And I was inconsolable. She's like, come back to my room. So I go back to her room, and she sits me down on the bed, and she starts just asking me, why are you crying? And I had never really talked to her about this, but, eventually I told her the truth. I said, I know that Jonathan messed up, but he can't go. He protects me. I'm scared of your husband. He can't go. Now imagine, you're my mom, and you have your people-pleasing child, the good child, staring at you, and, letting you know that, hey, the man you married, the one that's supposed to be my stepdad, I'm scared of him. And I'm actually siding with my brother on this one. He can't go. I don't feel safe. And I remember her looking at me and just saying, and I thought you were the good child. You can get out too. And so in that moment, so many things happen. I mean, you could pull a lot of different stories and, narratives and weavings that would come from this. But ultimately, the one that we're going to focus on today was that I was in that moment dubbed, you are the good child. You're my straight A student. You're the one who always, for the most part, does what I ask them, and now you're turning your back on me. Your brother just said these things to me, is acting this way towards me, and you are denying me. And yet, potentially, I was holding up a mirror and exposing to her that, yeah, the man that you rushed to marry might not be the man that you think he is. Who's to say what was going on in her mind? But what I do know is I was asked to leave the house just like my brother. We weren't gone forever, but I remember even the coming back. My mom, honestly, for months, didn't really speak to me or my brother, or at least it felt like months. She didn't really look at us very much. And then all of a sudden one day it was just like, we're back to normal. I don't know if it was time or, maybe she missed the good child. Um, but that stayed with me. You know, if you've ever been somebody who is always dictating themselves based on performance, you get it. You know, I remember there was a time right after my dad died that we were moving into a new house, and I wanted to help, and literally my mom, she looked at me, she's like, "Oh, you're not coming. You're not helping. You're going to your friend's house." And I was like, "What? Why not?" She goes, "You're lazy." And if you talk to anybody who knows me today, you can see that I've probably carried that chip on my shoulder for a while, because I don't think lazy is something that people would describe me as. And so today I want to talk through that hiding behind this mask, because for the longest time, it was like, cool, I'm going to become the performer. I'm going to become whatever you want me to be. And as I write in the book, one of these, and I'll say it and I'll say it again, I lived my life going, I'll be anything you want me to be as long as you love me. When you're the performer, you're constantly fighting for a seat at the table. When you're the performer, you're, constantly, looking over your back, dog eat dog world. And you get swept away in it. And it's tough, and for me, that was a story that dictated so much of my life. If you were to ask, hey, Sean, what is one of the biggest pains that you carry, or what's a story that you remember, that one would always surface up. No matter how much I went after it in counseling, no matter, doing EMDR or whatever I've done to process it, it's just been one of those ones where I'm like, there was so much weight in that one story. The good child, the people pleaser, the performer. And sadly, that weight, carried with me for my entire life, at least beyond. And for the longest time, I didn't know it. And so I'd find myself, wanting to, you lie to people to, save face. You try to, paint the picture that you want other people to see. And, for a long time, it almost seemed like I did it. I held the narrative. I went through college, and, I got pretty decent grades. I graduated. I walked across the stage. Meanwhile, I was dying inside. But if I could just put on that face, if I could just show people, hey, I'm showing up. I'm not going to talk about my pain. I'm not going to talk about my problems, except for like some very vulnerable moments. And if anybody got too close, I will push you away. Because when people get too close, they can start to see the cracks. And so, I constantly was trying to drive that narrative of, what do other people want to see? How do I become the thing that people do want to see? Last year, I was at a retreat at work, and so, some of the work that I've just had to do, the self work, the processing, looking into the mirror and going, how are you showing up? What are you seeing? What are other people seeing? Man, you just start peeling the onion, layer after layer after layer, constantly learning new things. And the good child, the people pleaser, is very much connected to so many of the other things that they're all intertwined. If you've ever been to, therapy or counseling, the healing that you're going through, you start to see how they muddy over. It's not this like clear cut thing. Just like when I would say, hey, addiction, I was an alcoholic, was drinking all the time, well, why'd you drink? Well, that's a really good question. To me, drinking is the symptom of a much deeper problem. And if I cut off the drinking, but I don't go after the roots of what led to that, I'm either going to go back out drinking, or I'm going to find another thing. It's easy to find another thing. And so it demands that of us. It demands us, rigorous honesty with ourselves and with another person or with other people, to be like, hey, I'm going to stop hiding. I'm going to be courageous in doing this. I don't know where I'm going, but I know that I can't stay here anymore. And so, anyways, last year, I currently, I work for a nonprofit, on our leadership team, doing marketing communications and just beautiful stuff for a great organization. And we were at this retreat with a bunch of the supervisors last year, and we had this great leader that was kind of facilitating different questions on leadership, and she ended up getting to this part where she was posing the question, what is something that you need to start doing differently at work to care for yourself? I'm going to say that again. What is something that you need to start doing differently in order to care for yourself at work? And I mean, everything. The performer, the people pleaser. And it was interesting because what came to me was, I don't know how to take a lunch. I was your chronic, Sean's working through lunch. Food at, the table, just rip roaring through emails and projects, and, never taking time to breathe or stop. And, so she even asked, is someone willing to, share what it is? And, I raised my hand and I said, I told him exactly that. She goes, why do you think you don't take a lunch? I said, because I never want anyone to think that I'm lazy. I never want anyone to contemplate whether or not that seat that I currently have at the table doesn't belong there. That I had to fight for it, that I constantly had to keep grinding in order to preserve face. I remember, I got pretty emotional in that time, and I remember her looking at me and she just said, what's something that your coworkers can do to support you? And I said, literally just know that I'm constantly battling this voice that tells me you're not enough. This voice that says, oh, but look at what you messed up here. Look at how you didn't achieve here. And so even if it's in my personal life, sky's the limits on, things that I could pick apart. But then if you move over to a professional setting, sky's the limits there. If you are constantly seeking to please people, if you're constantly the performer, then when people give you feedback, it sounds like the most harsh criticism you could ever hear. And for the longest time, I had to learn, and I remember a dear friend telling me, no is in the nutrients. And yet every time I didn't get something or, didn't get that attaboy, I was left sitting there thinking I'm the failure because I couldn't perform. The good child failed again. And so how do you navigate this space? How do you, okay, so hey, Sean, you've had this, you've had this experience. You're starting to become aware of these things. What do you do with it? Where do you go from here? I remember when I was in serving in Mexico, I got to do some incredible things. I was like reading, some last minute edits of the book today, and I was like, man, I didn't spend enough time talking about, Mexico and just how incredible it was to be able to spend time with these amazing children that were down there. And I met some incredible people. I had the most amazing experiences and like literally just got to witness miracle after miracle after miracle just happening in this place. And so you won't find it in the book. I'll talk more about it, but I was like, well, maybe I need to, do I add something? I digress. Because when I was down there, it was like, I want to do a good job, but I also was so unhealthy in my ways. I wasn't drinking anymore, but I hadn't had that moment yet, which you will hear about in the book and you'll hear about in later podcasts, when somebody shoved that mirror in my face and was like, here's your deepest pain. Here's your deepest pain. And so until then, I was operating out of a place of unhealth. I have people that I hurt. I wasn't having direct conversations with people that I needed to have. You know, I was unhealthy. And so even in that unhealth, I was constantly working for praise. I mean, I think most people like to know that they're doing a good job, but when that is your motivation, man, I mean, it's like chasing love. You true love, you don't earn. Like it's just it's there. You know, I think about even just like God in general. Ain't nothing I did that earned, that love or to receive that grace. Ain't nothing I did. And the moment I start thinking that it was anything to do with me, I have made a giant error. It is a love that surpasses understanding. Because how many of us have experienced conditional love? Or if you're a fan of Bon Iver, like I am, skinny love. Hey, um, but I remember my sister just watching me and constantly just like, oh yep, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. I mean, Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades, master of none. And I enjoyed what I was doing, but I was constantly on the go, never resting, always trying to perform, obsessing about things. Still struggle with that today. And she finally just once looked at me. And if you hear nothing else from this podcast today except for this one thing, I hope you carry this with me. I've been told that, when somebody, has a quote, once you quote it 3 times, it's yours. I'm not going to try, so I'll give credit where credit's due. My sister literally looked at me. I love my sister. And she said, Sean, do you know that you're a human being, not a human doing? You are a human being, not a human doing. And yet at that moment in my life, it was all about status, accolades. How much can I produce? Constantly fighting for a seat at the table. After that offsite work meeting that I had last year, our CEO and I were chatting, and I was talking to him about performance and just wanting to be great. Wanting to be a craftsman. Just, how do I get better at the things that I'm doing? How do I continue to keep just driving? And he posed a question. I don't exactly remember how it came about, but essentially he was like, have you ever considered that you're less motivated by greatness and far more motivated by fear? And that has stuck with me ever since. Because when I think of greatness and, there's room for error. You keep striving, people talk about, oh, you failed, get back up again, keep going. For me was, if I fall, I'm going to look like an idiot. Done. Not trying again. Preservation. All of those things. I think of, that same fear is the thing that keeps us stuck. It keeps us comfortable. It keeps us from ever trying to step out of the boat and try and move into the life that we were called to, or even the one that we can't even fully articulate yet, but are like, man, I feel like I'm supposed to go do something else, but I am terrified to go do that thing. I'm terrified to have that conversation. I'm terrified of, losing the security that I have around me. I'm terrified of so many different things, and therefore I'm not going to move. I'm going to stay put, and I'm never going anywhere. I will stay here because it's comfortable and it's safe. And at least here I can't fail. And yet if you've ever found yourself in that kind of wrestling, you eventually get to this point, depending on where you're at in life. Like, remember, the frame I'm talking to you from is one of becoming. And so as you literally, are understanding that you were created for something very specific, created in your mother's womb, fearfully and wonderfully made. Like, we each have a thing that we are called to do, and yet we have to be able to listen to that voice, hear the calling, and then go do. Even sometimes without having any of the answers. And even if you aren't a Christ follower, there's plenty of times in your life where you're like, I don't know what this thing is, but I feel like it's bigger than me. When I wasn't following God, I still remember those moments when I was like, I should be doing this other thing. Or when something came in and was like, you don't want to go down that road. Couldn't explain it. Sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't. You ever have that thing where you're like, there was something in me telling me not to go do that thing, and then I went and did it, and it just bit you? And so I think of that, metaphor. There's this story in the Bible of, you know, the disciples are in this boat, and, Jesus, they see him and he's walking on water. They're like terrified at first, dude's walking on water, and, one of them, his name's Peter, calls out, says, hey, if that's you, tell me to come and walk towards you. He's like, yeah, come on. And out of all the people there, he steps out of the boat. He steps out of that comfort. He steps out of the fear of performing. He steps out of the fear of, pleasing or going with the crowd. He steps out and he starts to walk. And he literally walks on water until he starts looking at all the things around him crashing. The waves, the wind, everything coming at us. And for the longest time, those waves, the wind, I could use this metaphor for anything, and I will use it plenty of other times. Pastor's been doing it for a really long time. Criticism, waves, wind. The opinions of others, waves and wind. Constantly swayed by what other people think of us. And there was a moment in my life when I decided that I realized that I wasn't living for, the life that I felt I was called to. I was living for whatever I felt that person wanted. Imagine that. And I truly believe that this happens all the time. Especially, in our personal lives, within our families, but then also like professionally. Status, the accolades. Always chomping at the bits for more. But the question, I've come to is, but to what end? If I spend my entire career trying to please other people and amount to the perception that I think somebody else has of me, I'm going to be miserable. I mean, it sounds miserable. And also, like, how fake. Always trying to guess what somebody else wants. Oh, I just can't please them. It's not your job. And that's when you start to find out, that this whole idea of becoming is, who are you created to be? What are the things that are true to you? Where do you differ with other people? Where do your opinions not line up? And being able to speak them out. It's not all about pleasing other people. At that moment when I was a young boy, literally sitting there and saying, I'm scared of your husband, I spoke the truth. And I was denied. And it led me to not speak the truth many other times in my life. And it ate me up inside. I'll smile. I'll put on the face. Everything's great. Oh my God, look, it's Sean. He works with the kids, and, he does all the great things with the nonprofits, and, he's always smiling. But then all of a sudden, you start to see the cracks. Oh, he likes to drink a lot. Sean's partying a lot. I let people see, at least I tried to control the narrative on, I'll let you see what I want you to see. Then you don't let people know who you really are. And the sad part is, I think for the longest time, I didn't know who I was. It's that funny thing. I might be dating myself on this, but um, if you've ever seen the movie Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts, there's this, she, gets engaged with people, and then she moves on. She Runaway Bride. She run away, and there's this thing where whoever she's engaged to at the time, she eats her eggs the way that they eat them. So like one person it's scrambled, somebody else it's poached or whatever, and she comes to a realization where she's like, I don't even know how I like my eggs. And towards the end of the movie, she comes back and she says which way she does. This is the way I like them. I know this might have felt like a little wandery, a little all over the place, but it all bleeds into one another. We all carry these stories, the masks that we wear, the things that we tell ourselves that we have to be. And in this area, it was, I have to be the good child. I have to put on the face to please others, to be the chameleon. And I mean, it bled into so many other areas of my life. And so today, I mean, it's not like Sean's cured. He doesn't do this anymore. Old habits die hard. I still find myself doing it every once in a while. And I've even actually found myself doing it and going back to people and going, hey, actually, I think something different. Or even being able to tell people like, hey, I have limitations. I can't do that thing. Hey, I can't do that right now, but I can do that in 3 days. One of the last things I'll talk about, and I'll talk about it again often, but it was like one of the books, actually, it's right behind me. That's Boundary for Kids, but Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud was a book that just rocked my world because he talked about the boundaries and being able to use the word no. And I was the good child. I was the yes man. Hey, Sean, can you do this? Hey, Sean, can you do this? Hey, Sean, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Yes, 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 yes. And inside, absolutely going crazy. And even being like, I hate you. Why'd you ask me? Why'd you ask me again? Why did you ask me again? And yet I'm the one sitting there going, yes. They've actually been conditioned now that when are you going to say no? And so I learned about the word no. I would have been terrified to say that to my mom. Hey, Sean, will you? No. She would have lost it. And so, I have to remind myself often. Hey, Sean, you have words. You can say no. Or you can also say, hey, I don't have time for that today, but I can get it to you tomorrow. And maybe some of you that are listening to this are like, hey, I work in this one place that's not realistic. Try it. Try it. But all I know is that the resentment that I was carrying, this poison that I was carrying towards other people, was poisoning my life, and it was my fault. I'm the one sitting there saying yes. I'm the one that set the precedence that I will do anything that you tell me to do. No boundaries. You can depend on the good child. And meanwhile, I'll die a little more inside. I don't want that for my life. I don't want that for my son's life. I don't want that for my wife's life. I don't want that for anyone's life. And my hope is that as we continue to journey together, that we can grow in this together, this becoming, like it never ends. We learn, we examine, we move forward, we fall, we take steps back, we take detours. But it's all about this just becoming and being ruthless in that and going, hey, I know where I'm at today. And I'm going to strive for more, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And I truly do believe I can't stress it enough that we all have something that we're uniquely made. And yet, if we're always saying yes to other people, um, I believe it takes us further away from that. It takes time for us to sit there with our pain and our hurts and our loss, and to realize where we're at, the realities. I mean, think about what my boss said to me. I thought I was motivated by greatness, and yet the mirror say, hey, you might just be motivated by the fear, losing love, not having a seat at the table, abandonment, everyone turning their back on you. It can be a lonely place. And yet I firmly believe that when we're living the life that we were created to live, we'll have peace, regardless of if it feels lonely, that we will live in a space where healing and wholeness is possible. So thank you so much for joining me again today. We'll continue to keep, putting out these podcast episodes, mirroring the book. I'm really excited for, the book to come out. First time I've done anything like this, and it won't be my best. I've also had to say, hey, you can do more and keep going. And I hope that that's that encouragement for you today, that you would be able to sit in whatever you need to and reflect. And, if you ever, need someone to chat to, you can go to our website. Shameless plug for the website, yellowcoatclub.com. I have a contact section there. You can ask questions. You could submit questions, material we can cover on the podcast. But my hope for you and anybody listening to this is that we just continue this journey of becoming. And we become ruthless in our pursuit of becoming who we were created to be, and not some, cookie cutter image of what we think the world expects of us. So with that, I will leave you. And yeah, it's been super weird looking at myself the whole time, and it's like the mirrors flip. So, it is what it is. Anyways, until next time, I appreciate you joining. And if this meant anything to you, or this might resonate with somebody that please don't be shy in sharing. This is for you. This is for my son Jack. This is for my wife. This is for anybody that God intends to find hope, healing, and rest in these messages. So thanks for joining me, and until next time.